Welcome to the Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's April 15th, 2022 program. Who will represent the Democrats in the Congressional District 4 race? This is the 27th program in our 2021-22 programming year. I'm Kitty Piercy, and I am the City Club President, and as I always like to say, proud of it. Support for City Club is provided by our members and sponsors. You can become a member of the City Club at our website, cityclubofueugene.org. This program is live streamed on our YouTube channel and archived there and on our Facebook page. Biographical information on our speakers is also available on our website. Our podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Programs are broadcast on public radio station KLCC on Monday nights at 7. We have both business and in-kind sponsors. Our diamond sponsors are Kaiser Permanente, University of Oregon, Peace Health, and Lane Community College. And we get generous support from the City of Eugene and from Lane County. Now, I would like to thank the coordinators of today's program, Sandra Bishop and Jennifer James Long. And with that, I will turn this over to Jennifer to introduce the program.
Hello, my name is Jennifer James Long, City Club member. Democrat Peter DeFazio represented voters in Oregon's 4th Congressional District for 36 years. Now 8 Democratic candidates are vying for election in the May 17th primary to run against a Republican candidate in the November general election. In today's program, candidates will have a chance to express their vision for the future of Oregon's Congressional District 4. The format today will be aired on KLCC in 2 halves. The first half on April 18th and the second half on April 25th. Each of the 2 programs includes a Q&A period with written questions from the in-person audience and questions received via live stream and text. The phone number to text your questions appears at the bottom of the screen on the City Club of Eugene YouTube channel during the intermission and Q&A segments. The candidates here today are Sami El Abdraba, Doyle Canning, Val Hoyle, Andrew Kallick, Jake Matthews, John Selker, and Tommy Smith. I want to introduce our moderators for today's candidate panel, Brian Bull and Chris Lehman from KLCC. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Brian and I have quite a number of questions that we hope to get through today, and hopefully we'll move things along, but we'd like to open this afternoon's program with an opening statement from each candidate. You'll have 1 minute in length, and you'll get a little bit of a, there's some cue cards here, so stop means stop, and 30 seconds means you have 30 seconds. So pretty straightforward. So again, 1 minute for opening statements, and we're just going to start by going down the table from left to right. So Sami, please begin.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for the club. My name is Dr. Sami El Abdraba. I'm running to represent you to be a voice for all in Oregon and in the United States Congress. What it means for voice for all is that I believe our health care and shelter are human rights. I will be fighting for every family. No family should declare bankruptcy because of illness or injury was too expensive. I'll be fighting for our educators with an educator retention plan because our youth, children, and businesses deserve an opportunity no matter what the zip code is. And what that means, fighting for education retention, fighting for full funding of special education, and making sure career and technical vocational training is available everywhere. My story of democracy, appreciating democracy, is rooted by my lived experience. I lived abroad, and I know what it means when you lose your voice. And we're seeing it here in this country. I'll be fighting for our rights. I'm running to be your next member of Congress, a voice for all. My name is Sami El Abdraba. I look forward to speaking with you and answering your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next opening statement, it will be from Jake Matthews, or Jake, thank you.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. My name is Jake Matthews. Just think of the most Indian name you can think of and you get Jake Matthews. I'm looking to build what's called a green, renewable, smart city here in our district. I know those words are kind of scary, and I should say right off the top, it's not a purchase, it's going to be an investment in the city, so the people who live in this district, whether you live in the city or not, will still make money off of it. This is actually being done around the world, in Saudi Arabia, Latin America, and right here in Arizona, and Oregon will not be left out of this race. The number one issue now that we have is extreme poverty in our district. Now, I don't mean necessarily homelessness like the middle class or anything, but 1 out of 5 doctors who we think have the highest salaries, are quitting the profession because the economy is now rigged against people like you and me. There's an economic stat called the Gini coefficient, and I would really encourage you guys to check what that coefficient is wherever you go. Right now, in this district, it's extremely high. This is the poorest district in Oregon, and we've gotten used to it. The per capita here is $24,000, while our congressmen make $174,000 per year and are allowed to do insider trading. This has to stop.
Thank you, Jake. And I'll just say you can just flow one right into the next, since I assume you'll be introducing yourself during your opening statement. So go ahead, John.
Thanks very much. I am John Selker, and as a scientist, I find solutions to environmental problems. I'm an engineer, and I love to find win-win solutions. I will solve problems for the 4th District. I've been an innovator in education for 40 years. I have confronted climate change by building the African Climate Observatory. As an extension agent, I brought cover crops, improved irrigation, and improved nitrogen management to the Willamette Valley to resolve the nitrate plume that is right below our feet. But we need to be well informed about the elephant in the room, and that's Val Hoyle. You will need to be informed as a voter. As chair of the Rules Committee, Val killed 5 ethics and government bills. But worst of all, on climate change, supported by oil, Val Hoyle voted for the Jordan Cove while taking $10,000 in political contributions from that project's developers. We have forest fires, we have droughts. Do you want someone who will actually turn climate change around, or once again, have the best candidate money can buy?
I'm Andrew Kallick. I'm the son of school teachers, a father of 3, and a former civil rights attorney at the ACLU. I'm running for Congress to bring an independent mind and a new generation of leadership to DC. Like many millennials, I have faced some of the challenges of younger Americans, trying to save for a home while paying a big child care bill every month and facing a mountain of student debt. And in addition to that, like many millennials, I've been frustrated by a politics that has grown increasingly polarized and partisan and poisonous, a politics that prevents people from getting together about what unites us in order to solve the problems that we face, from climate to the cost of living crisis. Now, you'll hear a lot about Peter DeFazio today, and I've voted for Peter, and many of you probably have too. But Peter DeFazio is not on the ballot this fall, nor this spring. This election is about the future, not the past, and we as Democrats have a real choice to make about what type of leader we want leading our community and our country in this next generation. Thank you.
My name is Tommy Smith, or G. Tommy Smith. Please call me Tommy. I'm a local kid here from the Valley. I graduated from Willamette High School. 2 weeks later, I joined the Navy. I spent 10 years as an air traffic controller. And the whole entire time, I missed home. And when I got home, I finally found a little bit of peace. You know, as I drive around, like many of you drive around here, you see a lot of problems going on. Unhoused, the mental health crisis that's going on. We need, like Andrew said, a new generation of leadership. Someone who's compassionate and is willing to work hard for our constituents. I have a plan for the unhoused. I have a plan to help economic solutions to the area. And if you give me a chance, I'll make you proud of me. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and Passover and Easter greetings to all celebrating this weekend. I'm Doyle Canning. I'm a mom, I'm an environmental attorney, and a progressive policy strategist with 20 years of experience moving our progressive priorities forward in Washington. In the worst days of the pandemic, I was preparing retail worker Anne Marie Reinhardt Smith for a meeting with the incoming labor advisor for President Biden. I said, "What is the most important thing you want to leave behind with the White House?" She said, "A $15 minimum wage can't wait." Those words drive my candidacy for Congress. That was the last conversation I had with Anne Marie. She died of COVID-19 8 weeks later. Our district deserves a Democrat who is a consistent champion for our progressive priorities. A $15 minimum wage, bold climate investments, Medicare for all, affordable housing. These priorities can't wait. I don't have dark money super PAC billionaires behind me trying to buy your vote. I'm here today to earn it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Val Hoyle. I'm your labor commissioner, and I just want to recognize this is the month of Ramadan. It is Easter week, and tonight starts Passover, so blessings to those of you who observe. Many of you know who I am because I've lived here and worked here for over 20 years. I was a state representative. I'm your labor commissioner, and I'm running for Congress because I want to take my values and my work in this community to Washington, D.C. We've had a strong voice in Oregon's 4th Congressional District in Peter DeFazio, and he believes that I am the right person to continue this fight. Now, when you look at the priorities that I have fought for, they are the priorities of the district, and I know that because I have personally knocked on tens of thousands of doors in this district. Now, many of my opponents will spend their time talking about me. What I'm going to talk about is my accomplishments, my vision, what I plan to deliver, and what I have delivered for this community, and hopefully will earn your support.
Thanks to each of you for an opening statement. We'll move now into our time of questions. And Brian and I have several questions that we'd like you to each answer. And you'll each get 1 minute to answer the question. And again, we're going to start and have you go down, but I will introduce you for the benefit of our radio audience so you don't have to say your own name each time. And then we're going to start with Jake and then kind of alternate who starts first. And feel free to shout out if we mess up the order and help us keep that straight. So Jake, this question goes to you first. This seat was held by Peter DeFazio for 18 terms, and you may be his successor. What do you see as the highlight or legacy of Congressman DeFazio, and alternatively, what do you see as his shortcomings?
Thank you. For his highlights and legacies, he is an extremely honorable man, and he has tried his best for this district, and he's done a lot of good. But for his lowlights, the per capita of this district when he started was $17,000, and that's if you include the city of Portland. I can't quite find it for this district alone, while his salary was $90,000. Since then, 34 years later, the per capita here is $24,500, which is not in step with inflation. And his salary is $174,000, and he gets to do insider trading if he wants to, like all politicians do for some reason. You guys are not being represented accordingly, and that's the homework assignment here. Are you getting actual representation by a politician that you sent to Congress to work for you? Are they suffering the way you are suffering? And my proposal is that a congressman only gets paid what the per capita is in this district. That way, they are now incentivized to bring in higher-end paying jobs to the district. So when the salaries go up here, then their salary go up. Not that they get to do whatever they want, make money, and then go home while we suffer.
Thank you. Jake, the question again is Peter DeFazio, his legacy and or his shortcomings. John.
Thank you very much. Peter DeFazio was a man of his time, and he did amazing things for this district. And most of his efforts were spent, and very successfully so, on investing in infrastructure. And when I go through the district, you hear story after story about libraries, about port facilities, about roadways and bridges. He left a true legacy that he can be proud of. These were investments that made a huge difference to our communities. Now, the world did change in the last 36 years, though, and now climate change is a key issue, and we have to look at what is the federal responsibility in taking climate change on. And indeed, the federal level is where it has to happen. We have to interconnect our continent So when we have wave power and it's cloudy in Seattle, we can send that power up there. We have to be connected. And DeFazio, interest in infrastructure, we have new infrastructure needs. Interest in medical care, we can no longer kick that can down the road. At a federal level, it's a federal problem. And those are some things we can look forward to now.
Thank you, John. Andrew, the question now goes to you.
Thanks very much. I agree with John that the legacy that Peter is leaving on transportation and infrastructure is enormous. And the reason why Peter was able to do that was because he entered Congress at the tender age of 39. I think it's a great time to enter Congress. And he dug in. He gained seniority, and he was able to bring home results for his district. On the other hand, outside of the knowledge economy hubs of Eugene and Corvallis, there's a lot of places in this district that are struggling in the 21st century economy that have not seen the type of opportunity for their kids that everybody deserves. And so I'm going to go to Congress to try to make sure that we have economic opportunity and economic options for people in every city in this district. Peter also showed up everywhere. And I know that from showing up everywhere myself, having conversations in every city, big and small. And I think we as Democrats need to continue to do that so that people feel respected, people feel heard, and people know that we want to be a voice for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Tommy, the question now goes to you, the legacy and or shortcomings of Congressman DeFazio.
You know, Pete has been great. He personally helped me out when I got out of the Navy, him and his office, by my VA disability claim, and got moved to the top of the line. So I owe Peter, a great big thanks. You know, I watched all Peter's videos on YouTube when he was on the floor, yelling at his colleagues about what needs to be done. And, those are great videos. But the problem is that we're running into is the stalemate in Washington. We need someone to go back there, remind people back there that we need to get things done. We need someone to go back there and remind people that there's kindness in this world and we need to actually generate more of it. We need to have someone to go to Washington and get things done, start working with the other side, start talking to the other side, start getting people to come to common ground. No matter what I've done, no matter where I've been, I've taken all sorts of people from all groups of life and had them come together for a common goal. We need that more now than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Doyle, the question is now for you.
Thank you. Yesterday, I had the privilege of a tour of the Port of Port Orford with Mayor Pat Cox down there, and he showed me the jetty that Congressman DeFazio delivered that makes that fishing economy in the small town of Port Orford possible. Congressman DeFazio leaves a tremendous legacy of pushing our district's priorities forward on the halls of Congress for our environment and protecting federal lands. The Devil's Staircase Monument, the scenic Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. These will be my priorities as well. I will continue Congressman DeFazio's strong legacy of excellent constituent services. I'm so glad you brought up his office's advocacy for you, for your veterans' benefits, and that is a tradition that I will proudly continue. I hope at the end of my first term that the people of Oregon's 4th District have our faith in democracy restored, because the doors of our district office will always be open to handle things like Social Security, immigration, and veterans' benefits. And I'm proud to have the only endorsement in this race from a veterans organization for my commitment in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Doyle. Val, the question to you again is the legacy and or shortcomings of Congressman DeFazio.
I think what we've seen with Congressman DeFazio is that in this district, we punched above our weight class. Peter DeFazio was a strong voice, whether he was speaking out against people in his party or without. He was a fighter for the district. He had more constituent outreach per capita than any other congressional district in the country, which is why he has a 93% name ID and an 87% approval rating, because he works for us for every minute. And we will certainly miss him. His advocacy for infrastructure is second to none. And I think that those are things that can bring jobs. And that is what I would like to continue to do. If he has any shortfall, he's just one of 435, right, in a highly polarized body. But Peter has done incredibly well representing a district that has very, very conservative areas, very, very progressive areas, because he stands up for working people, and I look forward to continuing that legacy.
Thank you, Val. And Sammy, the question is now for you.
Thank you. I believe Congressman DeFazio have served the district very well, so ditto to everything has been said about his legacies. For those who are old enough, not me, who voted for Congressman DeFazio at 1986, you voted for a person who was about my age, who was showing up for you everywhere. And that's what I look up for. That's what I've done in my community. Soon after I was elected, I was showing up, knocking on doors and talking to people, and they're telling me campaign season is over. And I tell them, no, constituency service is never over, and you have to be out there. That's who Congressman DeFazio is. He shows up. Every household, almost every household, they have their story about him. He stood up for Boeing and investigated them. Wicked smart, ready to ask the tough questions and to serve and always to be there for you. That's the member of Congress that I looked up to, and that's the member of Congress I will be. That's who I am as a public servant today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our second question. Inflation is at record levels, hitting Americans in their wallets, even as wages are on the rise. What role, if any, should the federal government play in bringing inflation under control? And we'll start with you, John.
Thanks very much. It is a tremendous situation that we have faced before. When I got out of college in 1981, inflation was at a gallop and the economy was at a standstill. This is a result of course, many things, including the pandemic and pushing a lot of money out to keep people afloat during this time, and the supply chain things, which are beyond the management of almost anybody in this world at this point. We're trying our best. We clearly need to be careful, and so we have to be very much more conservative at this point with shoveling out money out the door. We need to be very strategic in what we invest in and do it in a way that does not create more bottlenecks in our economy. We can manage this. It is being managed. It is, I think, a blip rather than a trend, but we have to be mindful of what it will take to keep our economy on a smooth keel. And I've lived through high inflation periods, and this is not what we want to have again. And so therefore, being fiscally conservative, fiscally careful is what's going to be the key piece in this situation.
All right, and then moving on to Andrew, the question again. What role should the federal government play, if any, in bringing inflation under control?
Sure, thank you. We have a cost of living crisis in America. Gas, groceries, housing, healthcare. We had it before inflation hit. Already too many people in our communities could not afford those basic needs. And so while on the inflation question in particular, it's really the Federal Reserve that has the most authority and the most power to limit inflation, Congress's role is to make sure that people can afford a roof over their head, to make sure that people can afford their health care bills, to make sure that people can afford the type of family wage job, get the type of family wage job that can pay their bills. And so what I will do as a member of Congress is make sure that pharmaceutical companies don't call the shots anymore, that we can negotiate prescription drugs through Medicare, make sure that we have a tax code that supports affordable housing, not luxury development, and make sure that we put more money in the pockets of working class Americans. That's how you solve a cost of living crisis, inflation or not. Thank you.
All right, moving on to Tommy. Again, the federal government and bringing inflation under control.
The government has a huge role in inflation. The issue right now is that the Federal Reserve can't even meet for a quorum because half of the Republicans won't even show up for it. And that's a huge issue. The Federal Reserve is a key point in helping out with inflation, and they can't even meet because a whole group of people just decide that they don't want government to function anymore. And that has to stop, and it has to stop right now. We need someone who can go over there and kind of smack them around a little bit and remind them what their jobs are. It's to serve us, not themselves, but us. We have a lot of corporate greed that's going on in this country, and we need to do a nice tax hike for the rich. We need to do several things. We can add 1 million jobs to the economy tomorrow by on-the-job training programs. And I believe I'm the guy that can help make all this happen. Thank you so much.
And moving on next to Doyle, how do you see the federal government helping bringing inflation under control?
Thanks for the question. Well, President Biden's signature Build Back Better plan would bring inflation down, and it hasn't passed in Congress because of the Republican Party and a handful of Democrats who are bought and paid for by Big Pharma and the fossil fuel industry. I've been taking on the oil industry for a long time, so I'm unsurprised to see the lengths they'll go to protect their profits, and that while the price of a barrel is low, for them, the price at the pump for us is high. I support the windfall profits tax introduced by Senator Sanders and Representative Ro Khanna, which would tax the largest oil companies and deliver a quarterly check to working Oregonians to get through the high energy costs of this period. But this crisis shows us that in the long term, what we need to do is move towards renewable energy and bring renewable energy manufacturing back to America. Thank you.
All right, same question to you, Val.
Okay, thank you. Inflation is about rising costs to working families, and there are many ways that the federal government can intervene. I mean, the first is, and I agree with Doyle, that passing Build Back Better is an important thing. With the child care tax credit, we have child poverty. The fact that we couldn't move that through Congress, that and infrastructure are somehow partisan issues, is absolutely appalling. I agree we need the windfall profits tax now, and we need to call out oil companies that are profiteering off of Putin's war crimes by keeping prices high at the gas, for people going to the gas station, and invest in bringing manufacturing back. This is some of the work that I have done as labor commissioner, both in making sure that we can have jobs that pay more so that people can afford housing, so that they can afford health care, so that they can afford to live a middle-class life, and that's what I'll continue to do in Congress.
All right. And Sammy, again, inflation at record levels. What can the federal government do, if anything, to help?
Yeah, if anything. So I agree with the last statements in terms of what can we do as a federal government. I will start being very clear. The number one thing we need to do as Congress, protect the Federal Reserve from being politicized and have people there who are experts and also who have the lived experience of the working people, who understand the impact on us when they control monetary policies. That's the number one thing we need to do. And we need to supply child care. We need to supply jobs that are sustainable through the Build Back Better. We need to provide opportunities for people to afford the supplies that we need to see at the grocery store. The federal government can protect and support small businesses and entrepreneurs who want to provide high value, very desperately needed services and products, especially in rural communities and communities of color. That's what I will do, protect the reserve from being politicized and provide support for the supply of the goods and services we desperately need.
All right, and that's time. Jake, again, record inflation and what the federal government can do.
Thank you. I can't overstate what a silent killer, inflation is. It may just seem like $1 extra at the pump, so $15 overall, and maybe we can eat that week after week, but it adds up. And if you have an investment in stocks or small businesses or rental properties, and you make 7% return on investment that year, but inflation is 9 to 10%, there goes everything that you worked for that year. The problem here is that we have a debt to GDP ratio that's now at pre-World War II levels, which are levels that levels that Warren Buffett always warned us not to get to, and now we're there. The other thing is that, like G. Tommy Smith said, the Republican Party needs to be dismantled. I'm not sure who we're actually reaching across the aisle to anymore. We know that we're looking out for the good for this country, while the Republican Party, led by Mitch McConnell, says, I'm looking forward to standing in the way of anything you guys propose. How is this a party worth reaching across the aisle to? Even the Lincoln Project, which is a conservative movement, said this is now a treasonous party. They're now an enemy of the state. It's time that we do what we actually want to do here. And until that happens, we're just going to keep suffering.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Andrew and go down the line, and we'll turn to foreign policy for this one. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been widely condemned. President Biden has enacted severe economic sanctions against the Russian government. What more, if anything, should the United States do to deter Russia or help Ukrainians?
Thank you for the question. I think it's incredibly important that America lead on the world stage, and I think the world needs America to lead, whether that's on climate, whether that's on COVID, whether that's on pushing back on autocrats and warmongers and war criminals like Putin. America is the indispensable nation, and we need to lead. I'm proud that President Biden has provided the support to the Ukrainians that he has. I think we can do even more to get them machinery and materials to advance their effort. I think we need to consider expanding NATO. The defense minister of Finland was on the radio the other day talking about their enormous border with Russia and how they'd like to be part of the alliance. I'd like to see that happen. And finally, I think it's important that we show up as allies, not just while the war is happening, but after. Have that Marshall Plan for Ukraine to rebuild, because they're going to need all the help that they can get. And an ally doesn't just show up once, they show up again and again and again. And that is what America needs to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Tommy, the question for you now, the U.S.'s role with Ukraine.
Well, we're doing a lot right now with Ukraine, and I don't know if, besides cutting off the gas and oil to Russia, from Russia, is probably the biggest economic step that we could possibly do. And they're currently working on that currently. We can't do too much because of the nuclear capability of Russia. We do not want another nuclear fallout, or another one. We don't want one, period, I meant to say. But some of the things that we could possibly do is get Finland into NATO and things like that. But the issue is that there might be a chance that when NATO or votes, or the NATO countries vote on Finland to be added into NATO, that we here in the United States, because of the Republican Party, may not allow them to join. A lot of them on the other side are rooting for Russia. And that is a real shame. We need to educate the country on what really is going on over Ukraine, what we're doing about it, and how we can improve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tommy. Doyle, the question now for you, the U.S.'s role with Ukraine.
Thank you. When I was a little girl of about 5 years old, my mother woke me in the night and told me to grab what I could carry, and we fled our home because it was too dangerous. So my heart goes out to everyone in Ukraine who has had to flee their home during this crisis. What we're seeing are war crimes, crimes against humanity. I would definitely support charging Putin in the International Criminal Court, but I also would strongly support the United States signing the treaty for the International Criminal Court. I support President Biden's ability to command the world stage and unite to target the oligarchs who are profiting from Putin's war crimes. And I will always be an advocate for refugees, not just from European countries, but from all countries who are suffering the grave impacts of war. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doyle. Val, the question is for you.
Sure. So this issue is personal for me because I have been spending the last couple months, few weeks, working with Ukrainians in our communities to get their families here. It's horrific what's happening. So we must stand with Ukraine in this moment and do everything we can to accelerate the humanitarian and military assistance to Ukraine and give Ukrainians the ability to defend themselves against the greatest threat in Europe since the Second World War. We should also be prepared to welcome Ukrainian refugees here to Oregon and to Lane County. And we should do everything we can to leverage our diplomatic power to prevent a wider war that draws the United States into conflict. This is the first time in my children's lives that we have not been involved in a foreign war, and I would like to keep it that way, but fundamentally, we need to do whatever we can to support Ukraine, and I do appreciate Biden's experience in this area.
Thank you, Val. Sammy, the United States' role in Ukraine.
The United States role in Ukraine should be the same role that we have described on the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your poor, your tired, yearning to be free, and I will stand up for the Ukrainian people. They want to be free, and we need to lead with peace before war. As someone who stood up for the refugees, as someone who stood up for the immigrants in my local community, I think we need to do more on the national and international stage. I want us to lead with peace. I want us to have allies in Europe and support them. They're asking us for the supports. They're asking us to be the partner that we should be. We're doing good things. We need to do better. And that's what I'll do in Congress. I'm having the flashbacks of the Iraq war invading Kuwait and my grandfather telling my dad when he was in Arizona, "We're okay, son. We're okay, son." They were not okay. They were terrified. The Ukrainian people today are terrified, and we need to stand up for them and live up to our ideals.
Thank you, Sammy. Jake, the question is now for you.
I don't think, unfortunately, some of my colleagues here know how the Kremlin works. The Kremlin is run by a strongman surrounded by Russian oligarchs who have wealth beyond our wildest imaginations. The only way to get them to stop is to hit them in the wallet. You have to seize their assets, their boats, their yachts, their houses, and then they will stop. There is no other way to do this. Furthermore, the threat here isn't actually nuclear war. The future of war will be fought on our phones. It's going to be cybersecurity, cyber attacks, and that's how you bring down the Kremlin in this case. You can send arms to the Ukraine for now, but the only way to defeat Russia is to hit them in the wallet personally and to do cyber attacks there. The future, World War III will be fought on our phones. We have proof of this when Mohammed bin Salman personally sent malware to Jeff Bezos' phone, and that's how he got exposed for his extramarital affair. That's from one head of state to another. If they are not secure, how are you and I secure? So keep in mind here that the future of war is cybersecurity, and this is the only way to defeat Russia in this case.
Thank you, Jake. And finally, to John, the U.S.'s role in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. This is a heart-rending situation, and it's particularly difficult for a Quaker. Quakers are pacifists, and yet my mother's family was wiped out in Germany. She escaped at 16 years old, and I think we have to provide people who are being attacked with a capability in the defensive area. I'm very proud of the fact that we are doing that, and we are letting the Ukrainians take care of and defend their very own land. That's the minimum we can do. But how are we here? We did not have an ambassador in Ukraine. She was fired by the past president. We spend 5% or less on all of our international aid programs that we do on the military. If we are going to have security, it will come from relationships. It will come from working with people. It will come from knowledge of those places. That's where we're missing our effort. So yes, we will support the Ukrainians, but we have to reinvest in diplomacy.
Well, we'll ask people to avoid making outbursts during the debate. Here's a follow-up question, though, and we'll start with Tommy on this one. There are concerns that with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, other major powers could be swayed to do the same, namely China with Taiwan. As a congressional representative, how would you address a potential invasion scenario in that region?
Well, that's really hard to say with one representative how they're going to help protect Taiwan. That's putting a lot of pressure on just one person. But, you know, what you got to do is be an advocate for our allies, right? Taiwan's the last holdout from China from back in the 30s. And so, you know, all we can do is just really, as a congressman, is just to support them. You know, let your constituents know what's going on there, inform them. As an individual, there's literally nothing one individual can do. I mean, just to be honest with you, and I'm a little too honest sometimes, but that's the truth. You can advocate about what's going on over there. You can educate what's going on. You can vote on bills. You can be in conferences and everything else. You can be going over there trying to help out. But reality is you're very, very limited on what you actually can do as a representative, you know, when it comes to foreign policies. The only thing you can do is be informed and educate. And that's what I plan on doing. Thank you.
All right, that question now goes to Doyle. Again, potential aggression from China against Taiwan.
Thank you for the question. The reason we have the United Nations and the Security Council is to, is to prevent such a scenario, to stop countries invading other countries with impunity and committing war crimes. Congress in the United States holds the exclusive power to declare war. It's a power that has gradually shifted more and more to the executive in the last 20 or so years of the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, Yemen, and elsewhere. And I have always stood strong as an advocate for peace and global security. And I would want to see the United States work through the United Nations, through diplomatic channels, to avoid a world war. And for Congress to hold on to its authority as the sole power in our three branches of government that can declare war. I am proud to have the support of Common Defense for my candidacy for Congress. It's a veterans organization that has stood against the forever
I'm afraid we're at
wars.
time. Thank you very much, Doyle. Question to you, Val, again regarding a potential scenario where China threatens Taiwan.
So I think what has happened in the Ukraine and how President Biden has handled this has made China take notice. The fact of the matter is he pulled in all of our allies and said, we will stand strong for democracy. And that sent a message. Had we just stood back, like the former president would have done, and allowed Putin to just go in and take over Ukraine, what message would that have sent to other countries like China, in terms of their willingness to take over countries where there are thriving democracies? So I believe that we need to support democracies. We need to work with our allies. We need to work through the UN. We need to do everything we can diplomatically to ensure that we as the United States don't get dragged down into intractable wars, but we need to be clear that we support democracy.
All right, and turning now to Sammy, same question.
Thank you. The United States should maintain its consistency in terms of how we treat our adversaries and our allies. When President Biden said America is back, what we mean by that, we're back on the national stage strengthening our partnerships. Just like what one of my colleagues mentioned, we are powerful when we have those strong diplomatic and economic partnerships that deter adversaries from making aggression. However, we have seen it. Russia invaded Ukraine, invaded Crimea, and had aggression on Georgia. There is a pattern there, and we need to examine why it's happening and how we can deter China from doing the same. I am going to be supportive of the current policy around Taiwan and China that the United States has. We need to be consistent, and we need to strengthen ourselves economically and diplomatically to deter those acts of aggression.
Thank you. Jake, your thoughts on a potential conflict with China and Taiwan?
We have to be hawkish on how we treat the Chinese Communist Party. I'm not sure when America started to kowtow to the Chinese Communist Party, but we did for several years, and it makes sense because U.S. oligarchs like J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon has heavy financial connections with the Chinese Communist Party, so then he influences the government, and the people that lose are, once again, you and me. The issue with this is China is making huge investments now in the continent of Africa, in Afghanistan, and in the Arctic, and we have done nothing about it because we're so deeply entrenched with them. Donald Trump actually personally owed $200 million to the Bank of China. How can we expect our government to do anything for us when they have a personal debt to this government? And in the same breath, I want to say, this is not anything against the Chinese people who are great. It's against the CCP. And I'm saying this as a person who had extreme racism against him after 9/11. This is not against the people of China who are great. It's against the Chinese Communist Party, which we have to stop kowtowing to.
All right. And John, your thoughts on a potential invasion scenario with China and Taiwan and how Congress could respond?
This is one of those things that has kept me up at night because my graduate student worked in the South China Sea during the tension with China. They had a lockdown. They couldn't get out of their bunks for 2 weeks. We also collaborate with Taiwan. I just wrote 2 papers with a scientific team from Taiwan, and I wrote 2 papers with teams from China. The point is that keeping those relationships strong and understanding each other is a key piece, and that's, again, the diplomatic side. But we also have to absolutely make clear that we will maintain international waters where they should be. And we have to absolutely make clear that the cost of China invading Taiwan will be beyond what they can afford. And so we have to be strong. It has to be on all fronts. And we have done a pretty good job at that. It's a very tight wire act, but I do agree with Jake that our relationship to China has to be constantly under revision to be able to make sure that we have the right balance between a government that does not respect their people and those key people who are at risk because of it.
And finally, Andrew, your thoughts on a possible invasion of Taiwan by China.
Thank you. As a member of the Truman National Security Project, I understand that a progressive national security requires economic ties between nations. And as a Democrat, I think that one of the major blunders of our party in recent years was stepping back from the world stage in the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations and basically allowing China to set the rules of engagement in that part of the world. That was a huge blunder, not only because it hurts us Americans here at home and our ability to export to those markets, but as John said, what that does is it prevents us from being able to create leverage to make sure that China doesn't invade in the first place. One of the reasons why we've been able to rally the troops behind Ukraine is because we have been able to isolate Russia economically. But right now, we could not do the same thing with China. That's because we don't manufacture enough at home, and that's because we don't have the ties we need with nations in that region. We need to strengthen those ties as a means of deterrence and continue to keep diplomatic channels open to prevent anything ever happening like this in Taiwan. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. We have time for one more question before we take a break. This question I'll turn first to Doyle. With the pandemic entering its next phase, how would you grade the federal government's handling of COVID-19 thus far? What should the federal government's role be going forward?
Thank you for the question. This crisis has shown us what is possible when the resources of our federal government are mobilized with urgency to address a crisis. The 9-month creation of a life-saving vaccine and its rapid distribution free of charge, come one, come all, across our country in a matter of weeks. That is what we can do. And that gives me a lot of hope for what we could do with an approach like Medicare for All. I'm a strong supporter of universal health care. This pandemic has shown us the disparities in our healthcare system even more raw than before, as we see higher rates of mortality from COVID-19 from people who are working class, poor, working so-called essential jobs, public-facing. That's the work I did during the pandemic. That's who I will continue to fight for in Congress. And right now, the funding for COVID-19 testing has dried up. That is an atrocity, and we've got to make sure that we fix that.
Thank you. We're at time. Val, the question to you, the federal government's role in COVID-19 going forward.
So I think one thing that we have to acknowledge is the level of misinformation and politicization of addressing this pandemic, and it's happened all throughout the world, and it has made it a hell of a lot more difficult to keep this under control, right? So, number one, in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have enough personal protective gear for workers. People in many states didn't have access to health care. We were getting our masks and things from offshore. So number one, we have to look at being prepared for the next pandemic, and that means keeping our manufacturing here for personal protective equipment, for masks, and making sure that people have access to health care. I am proud that here in Oregon, I helped pass paid sick leave, which means that people can stay home when they're sick, and that is one of the most important things we need to do to ensure that we don't have another pandemic at this scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. A question for you now, Sammy.
Thank you. I think we as a community, and since the new administration took over, we have done great work, vaccine deployments and testing. We can do better. The inequities are tremendous. Rural areas did not get the support as the urban areas did. Communities of color did not get the support as others did. we need to apply the equity lens in how we tackle any emergency or disaster, especially pandemics. The role of the federal government is to continue what we did in terms of supporting funds for schools to get the kids safe and back into school buildings, to help local health departments do the work that they did, the phenomenal job that they did, deploying the resources, funding loans and supports for small businesses and nonprofits and governmental agencies to be ready whenever something else hits, whether it is a new variant or something we never imagined is possible. The preparedness, coordination, and education tackling misinformation is what Congress can do to prepare us for the next pandemic, next stage, or any other challenges.
Thank you, Sammy. Jake, the federal government's role in COVID-19.
The largest issue here isn't necessarily how the federal government treated COVID-19, it's how that information went through the media and into our homes. And we had a country that was in complete disarray and not on a unified front and not tenacious against a disease that we could have stopped a lot earlier. We could have got more vaccines and more arms. We could have been a unified front against this, and we could have opened up small businesses a lot sooner. But we didn't, because there was a large percentage of the US population that believed the vaccines don't work, for example. And that's by design here. When I'm in Congress, I'm going to pass something called the Fairness Doctrine, which we used to have, but that was actually repealed by Ronald Reagan in the late 80s. And it required that anyone who labels themselves a journalist has to report unbiased news, and they're not allowed to engage in sensational journalism. And if they are doing so, then we're allowed to sue them. We're in a level of mass psychosis now that we don't even realize we're in. We're hating each other, and we're not on a unified front. And this is by design by the mainstream media. Fox, MSNBC, it doesn't matter. We're not getting accurate, factual news anymore.
Thank you, Jake. Our next question about the federal government's response to COVID-19. Not next question, our next respondent is John.
Thanks so much. Science. Well, guess what? We pulled off an amazing thing. We're sitting here without our masks on thanks to some amazing vaccines. And what we made a huge mistake in, and we being generous, what administration made a huge mistake was not putting science out forward. Frankly, between Trump, even, and Cuomo, we should have had the scientists who had the facts speak directly to the people. As a country, we have to be prepared for these things, and we knew this was coming. There have been any number of books. And when we did the math in my department, when it broke out, we saw exactly where we were going. We made, unfortunately, the correct predictions of what was going to happen. So we know how to handle these things. We have to have the scientists first. We have to have the preparation in hand, and we have to invest in being ready, which means the science and the materials in position, ready to go. And we have to depoliticize by putting knowledge and truth before politics.
Thank you, John. Andrew, the question's now for you.
Thank you. I agree with Doyle that if the pandemic showed anything, it's the need for a single-payer Medicare for all system. I mean, if we didn't think it before, we better think it now. And I'm proud to be endorsed by the Oregon single-payer advocates, and I will fight for that in D.C. I'm also proud to have worked on the initial CARES package that extended unemployment benefits to folks who traditionally didn't get them. That includes sole proprietors, independent contractors. People were in desperate need when we closed things down in March 2020, and Congress actually did answer the bell in a bipartisan way to help. Now, I'm also the parent of 3 children under 5. They still can't get a vaccine. They had all sorts of childcare disruptions, and school closures became a political proxy instead of something that is guided by science. Almost every other country in the world kept their schools open. They prioritized their kids. They prioritized learning. We didn't. We let politics take over. That was wrong, and now we have to make up for it with mental health treatment, with educational opportunities in the summertime. Let's make up for what we didn't do for our kids and never let that happen again.
Thank you, Andrew. And Tommy, the question is now for you.
I'm really glad Fox News wasn't around during the polio epidemic. You know, there'd be a lot less people around here today. You know, I've lost friends over this pandemic. And all I was trying to do is, God willing, is to help them. And now a lot of them won't even talk to me anymore. And that's the problem, isn't it? We forgot how to be neighbors. We forgot that we need to be there for each other. You know, we're all in this together. And we need to have someone who actually reminds people of that, who comes from a faith-based background. who remembers that love thy neighbor is the way of life. You know, just time and time again on the other side, they don't talk about science. And more people are dying. Even right now, there's people dying. And we're not talking about it. It's just a headline, and then we move on. But we need to remind people every day that people are dying out there, that you need to protect your neighbor. You need to protect your friends. And that's what I'm about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are now going to close out this segment with City Club President Kitty Piercy.
As you can see, I'm not Kitty. That's for the benefit of the split program once it's on KLCC. So we're now going to take a break before we begin the second half of the program, and the break will be about 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute notice when it's time to find your seats. Should I pick the mic right? So what you guys will be doing is, for the KLCC area, you'll be saying, Kitty will be ending her introduction of the show.
Welcome back to the second half of the City Club debate for Congressional District 4. I am KLCC's Brian Bull. My co-moderator is KLCC's Chris Lehman. We are now ready to start the second round of questions for our 7 candidates. And this one, we will start off with Val. Homelessness is a persistent problem in Oregon, both in Eugene and in smaller cities in the 4th District. How can Congress help address the needs of communities as they seek to help the unhoused population?
So thank you. This is a really critical issue, and I'm proud that there are so many people here that I have worked with, whether it's Dan Bryant, Jerry, on bringing solutions. I think that having a housing first model is critical. The work that Ruth Demler has done to advocate to make sure seniors have the money to stay in their homes, because if you don't have a home, you can't deal with any of your other issues. The federal government has walked away from its responsibilities on housing, whether it's funding fair housing enforcement or investing in community housing. I think that the solutions for housing really vary by where they are. For instance, in Newport, I talked to people at the Coast Guard that can't promote because they can't find any housing, not just low-income housing, any housing at all. The fact of the matter is we need to work with local communities on solutions and also get the federal government back into the business of funding treatment for people with addiction and behavioral health services in a housing first model.
All right, thank you, Val. Next question, or same question to Sammy. Again, homelessness and how to alleviate it.
We have navigated homelessness and supporting families in the Corvallis School District with families who are experiencing housing insecurity, with school-age kids. We supported them with resources, and we navigated those challenges we're talking about with local and state and federal. And the challenge is with the vouchers, you wait 18 months to get the voucher, and then you cannot afford rent with the voucher that you get. We need to make sure the federal government can support communities, and there are several ways to do that. Number one, incentivize the development of low-income and affordable housing. Number two, let's think upstream. Why people are losing their paychecks and ending up homeless? Why people are suffering from healthcare costs that's ending up putting them in homelessness? We need to think upstream with the social services and welfare services and the supply of housing to support those communities. I've championed that work locally with partners, and I'll continue to do that for us in Congress.
All right, thank you, Sammy. Question now to Jake. How can Congress help address the needs of the unhoused population?
Thank you. Yeah, the green renewable smart city that I had mentioned in my opening statement actually specifically addresses this. Homelessness is now a rampant problem throughout the country and here. And what we can do is we can build affordable housing that's actually less than $200,000 per, and it's completely affordable to own as well. It also offers long-term rehab, which is the key difference when you go to rehab, is that you can't go for 21 days. It has to be 6 to 9 months for your actual, cellular structures to heal. That seems to be the key difference between someone who relapses on drug abuse versus being clean for their whole life. In the long term, there's something called the Connectome Project, which Barack Obama started the funding for, and that helps map out the human brain to help us discover what's happening with that person and how we can help them with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety, things like that, complex PTSD, which are the underlying issues of homelessness and drug abuse.
And shifting now to John, question again about Congress being able to address the needs of the unhoused or homeless population.
And this is an incredibly well-chosen question. Everywhere I go in this district, housing is the top on people's list. Our vacancy rate is at 3%. It is the second lowest after Utah, and it is twice as low as it was just 3 years ago. This is absolutely horrific. People cannot find housing. But we must remember that 70% of those who are homeless have either drug addiction, mental illness, or mental disability. We are not taking care of our people. So we have to include the homeless being part of our healthcare system and part of our services. Furthermore, we cannot figure there'll be a magic wand. The cost of building a 2-bedroom apartment right now costs $3,000 a month in rent to build that new. How are we going to bring that down? And we will do that by making sure that the federal government and the local governments provide land competitively so people can build housing that people can afford.
All right, and Andrew, again, addressing homelessness as a congressional representative.
Homelessness is a product of a systemic failure on multiple fronts. The first is not having enough housing. We need to build more. There's lots of ways to do that, and you can read more on my website, andrewkallick.com, about how I would tackle that. The second is mental illness. John spoke about it, and luckily the people of Oregon, in their wisdom, overwhelmingly passed a tobacco tax increase 2 years ago that funds mental health treatment and Medicaid for $160 million a year. You might wonder, why did it take so long for Oregon to pass something like that? And the reason might be because Big Tobacco has been funding legislators in our state, including Val Hoyle. When Val was in the legislature, there were multiple opportunities for Val to lead on increasing the tobacco tax and delivering support for mental illness treatment. Over and over again, those bills died in committee without Val's co-sponsorship, and over again, Val took the checks from Big Tobacco and cashed them. We need a different approach in Congress, an approach that puts people first.
Tommy, your thoughts on homelessness and alleviating the issue?
Well, everywhere you go, you see the problems, you know, and I put myself in their shoes, you know, being out in the rain, trying to look for shelter, trying to look for food, you know, trying to find a place to even use the restroom, you know, common, just human basic needs. And I see a lot of people who just kind of thumb their nose at it. There's a problem, but they don't want real-world solutions to fix these problems. You know, some of the things that we can do, we need to build more housing because there's definitely a demand for more housing, but where are we going to build these things at? We can't go out to Green Hill because that's basically sometimes turn out to a swamp. You know, so we got to build up. You know, we got to increase our mental health capabilities. My own family members have mental illness. One of them's bipolar. And whenever times he goes off his medications, well, he ends up on the streets. We need real social workers like Cahoots that can go out there and help these people on a one-on-one basis. And as a congressman, I'm going to increase funding to those various programs that will help in that. Thank you.
And that is time. And finally, Doyle, your thoughts on how Congress can tackle homelessness?
Yeah, first I want to talk about my supporter Ashley down in Coos Bay, who I saw day before yesterday. She is being evicted from her home to make way for a commercial Airbnb. Unlike Mr. Kallick, I don't work for Airbnb. I work for Ashley. And I'm proud that to be a co-founder of a national movement called Homes for All, with a mission to end homelessness in the United States. Homes for All now has a signature bill in Congress, the Homes for All Act, which I will champion when I serve our district. It will repeal the Faircloth Amendment that prohibits building new public housing and build 12 million public and permanently affordable rental units, driving costs down throughout the market. Yesterday in Port Orford, the chair of the Democratic Party there shared with me the waiting list for Section 8 vouchers in Curry County is 9 years long. We cannot wait for leadership for affordable housing. And that is the leadership I have demonstrated for over a decade and how I will lead in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Doyle. For our next question, we'll begin with Sammy, and this question incorporates input from a couple of our audience members. The most recent UN report on climate change warns that unless nations drastically reduce carbon emissions, the goal of limiting global warming will be out of reach in just a few years. What can you do as a member of Congress to get the U.S. to move away from fossil fuels toward renewable energy?
Thanks, Chris, for the question. We're seeing the adverse and real impacts of climate change in our districts in terms of droughts, wildfires, and coastal floodings. Locally, I did help introduce profitable and sustainable solar panels, resilient buildings, energy-efficient buildings in our communities, low-income housing, schools, businesses, and nonprofits, and they benefited from it, and the environment benefits from it. In Congress, we need to invest. The reports of the IPCC is alarming. We need to invest in sustainable solutions that we have developed here in our backyard. And I'm from Corvallis, so for duck fans, OSU is pretty solid on wave energy and technologies that we need to invest. And as a beaver who loves the ducks as well, I'm going to support local investments everywhere in the country to make our climate better and more sustainable. We cannot tolerate any patience with climate injustices. We need to make sure we have immediate actions that are systemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Jake, the question now goes to you.
The battle against climate change is going to be won in how we design cities of the future. Right now, cities are linear and not circular in their waste. The city that I'm proposing, here are some stats here. They have eco-villas that use 72% less energy than a normal home, using low-carbon cement with 90% recycled aluminum. The energy to water consumption will be down 40%. There's a 10-megawatt solar array that produces 17,500 megawatt hours produced annually, offsetting 15,000-ton carbon emissions. If these numbers don't sound good to you, I mean, I don't know what else we can do to fight climate change, because the battle will be fought in how we design a city. And we can build one right here.
Thank you, Jake. John, the question now to you. What can the U.S. do to move away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy?
Yeah, investments. Well, it's allowing investments sometimes. If you look at the interconnect between Oregon, Washington, and California, it pays for itself every 3 months. $3 billion a year in net value. Why don't we have a national level interconnect, which is absolutely essential for renewals being possible? Because the federal government did not get the right-of-ways. That's the federal government's job. In fact, that cost is $150 billion, and it will save $300 billion today. The money is on the table. The federal government has not done their work, which is not necessarily buying everything. It has to do with making sure it can happen. Similarly, California, when they simply said utilities will use these percentages of renewables, that was fine. The utilities love that because they're a cost-plus operation. And so, in fact, California is generating over half its energy from renewables. We can do that tomorrow. The utilities are on our side, and they want to do it. And we have the beautiful benefit of the fact that solar and wind are now cheapest form of electrical production in the world.
Thank you, John. Andrew, I'll turn the question over to you.
Thank you. As a member of Congress, I'll look at every bill as a climate bill. I think Jake is right. You got to think about climate when you're building cities. You got to think about climate when you're building infrastructure. You got to think about climate when it comes to the farm bill that comes up once every 5 years. And of course, in this district, you got to think about climate whether it's fishing or forestry. It's all over the place, and it affects everyone. And so I think we need, as Congress members, to think about those must-pass bills, like the Farm Bill or the Defense Authorization Act, and seize on those opportunities to get things done. Unfortunately, climate, like so many other issues in our society, has become polarized and partisan, and that's in part fueled by interests of fossil fuels. But it's also because we have not taken the approach of bringing people together, asking them to sacrifice for the future generations of this planet, and really getting down to brass tacks about what will solve this challenge. I'm a big believer that we need to move to renewable energy quickly. I think we need to do that justly. And so I support carbon tax and dividend programs that will help do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Tommy, the question now to you. How can the U.S. address the issue of global warming and climate change?
Thank you, Andrew, for mentioning the carbon tax, because that's definitely the number one thing that we need to do, is go to these industries that are major polluters of our air and tax them on it. And then, if we tax them enough, they're going to come up with a solution on how to curtail their own waste, if it's going to be in their best interest. We talked about solar wind up here, and we talked about wind energy, or solar energy and wind energy, and all those things are great. But what we're really fighting also, amongst a lot of other things, is misinformation. And there's a whole segment of the country who doesn't even believe in climate change. And it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us talking with one another, talking about climate change, talking about how it's affecting us personally and how it affects them personally. And then we can all start changing minds, and we can start moving forward and making actual real progress on this, because we're slowly killing ourselves, and it's got to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Doyle, the question now to you.
Well, others will tell you how they will lead on climate. I will tell you how I have led on climate for 2 decades as an environmental community organizer and environmental attorney. I'll tell you about Larry and Sylvia of North Bend, Oregon. I sat with them at their kitchen table, looking at the legal documents that Jordan Cove sent them, saying, if you don't sell your ranch, we're going to take it from you for a fossil fuel pipeline. Jordan Cove thought that they could bully and bribe, buy and pay for politicians like my opponent, Val Hoyle. And they didn't succeed, because we built a coalition of Republicans, Democrats, independents, unaffiliated voters, rural folks, tribal folks, young people, seniors, coming together to fight for Oregon's future, successfully turning back a $15 billion fossil fuel company. That's how I will lead for climate in Congress. And that's why I'm running for Congress, because I know this isn't a question of technology, it's a question of corruption. And that's why I take no money from the fossil fuel industry.
Thank you, and we're at time. Val, the question to you, the U.S. government's role in combating climate change.
Thank you. I agree with everyone here that the climate crisis is absolutely something we need to take on. And I will point out that advocating for something and talking about it is different than doing something. So I'm proud to be the only candidate here that has actually voted on and passed legislation to address the climate crisis. I voted for the bill to make Oregon the first state in the nation to transition to coal power, and I delivered the votes as Democratic leader to pass the Clean Fuels program. So, most people know, I came into politics through the labor movement, and what we have done in the past is make workers choose between feeding their families with good-paying jobs or helping the environment. We can't do that. We have to broaden our coalition, and that's why I have committed to not supporting new fossil fuel infrastructure. I have told the building trades that I will do that, and they trust me when I say that I will fight for infrastructure investment and green jobs, because we have to move forward. So.
All right, and that is time. Thank you, Val. Next question, in part from the audience. It's been almost half a century since Roe versus Wade, and abortion remains a hot-button issue. If elected, what will you do to ensure reproductive justice nationwide, and are you willing to take on the Supreme Court? And that question, we start with Jake.
I don't think I need all 60 seconds for this. A woman's body is her body, and I support her right to choose. And I would absolutely take it all the way to the Supreme Court. When you hear about abortion cases all around the world, especially in Latin America, it's disgusting that the government thinks that they can decide what you do with your body. A woman's choice is a woman's choice, and I support it 100%.
All right, the question now goes to you, John.
Yeah, women should have control of their reproductive lives. Having a child is a massive choice, a massive decision. And we need to support not only women in their hard reproductive choices, but also in the choices that lead up to their health and controlling their reproductive choices. The Supreme Court is now highly biased. It's a travesty, actually, how that occurred. I think many of you may agree with that. We have a system which is imperfect, but as legislators, we need to be recognizing that we are the lawmakers. The Supreme Court are the people who enforce the law. And so it is our job in the legislature to make sure that not only women's rights, but all people's rights, everyone has equal rights, everyone gets equal pay for equal work. These are things which we just have to do. And the situation with women earning a fraction of men's salary is an example of that.
All right, and we're at time. Thank you. Question to you, Andrew. Your thoughts on access to abortion rights and reproductive justice?
Thank you. I was a volunteer at Planned Parenthood escorting people past protesters to get basic reproductive care. I was a member of the board of my law school's Students for Reproductive Justice, and as a civil rights lawyer at the ACLU, I fought against disinformation coming out of crisis pregnancy centers that were set up to look like medical offices but were really anything but. So this is an issue that I've worked on for years and is deeply personal to me. I also think it's important how we approach this issue. Each of us probably got a questionnaire from a national right to life organization, and I saw that Val did something neat on her Twitter. She sort of tore it up and threw it on the ground and said, "This is what I think of that." And look, it made for good social media, I gotta be honest with you. But I don't think it helps us actually achieve the result that we need. I checked no on each of the questions on that questionnaire, sent it back to them and said, tell you what, if you want to sit down and figure out a way to reduce unwanted pregnancy, to get women the resources that they need, I'll be happy to sit down with you. I think that's the approach that we need in Congress.
All right, moving on to Tommy. Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, my thoughts. There's no law against men's reproductive rights. You know, why are there against women? That's a pretty basic question, isn't it? You know, what the people on the other side, and you know, I'm faith-driven, is that by outlawing abortions, you're just going to end up killing more children. They're going to go to back alley abortion clinics, and more people are going to die. What we need is preventive measures. We need to have ability for women to go in and get birth control pills and things like that to help unwanted pregnancies. You know, the day after pill needs to become more available to people. There's all sorts of avenues that we can do. We can do all sorts of things in schools and education and things like that to help with this issue. But I personally just cannot see myself telling what a woman to do with her own body. I mean, I just can't seem to do that. Thank you for your time.
All right, and moving on to Doyle. Again, your thoughts on Roe versus Wade and abortion access.
Yes, on this question, I want to think of my grandmother, who shared with me in confidence the back alley abortion she got before Roe versus Wade. She took that secret to her grave, and every year she gave a small donation to Planned Parenthood. I honor her legacy in this run for Congress because when Republican legislators seek to criminalize abortion care, as Democrats, we should be outraged, but we shouldn't be surprised. This is what Republicans do. Where we need to act is about the politicians who let them do it, let them get away with it. Congress could codify Roe v. Wade into statute today, could have done it 10 years ago. We fought so hard for our Democratic majority in this Congress, and we may lose it. We can't wait. We must act. I do support also a repeal of the Hyde Amendment to make public funding available for abortion care where needed, because if you can't access a right, it's not a right. I will fight to defend reproductive justice at every turn.
Thank you, Doyle. Val, your thoughts on the question.
So when I was 4 or 5, I sat at the kitchen table while my mother helped organize with the National Organization of Women to make abortion legal and make birth control legal. And understand that the National Right to Life organization is not just about abortion. It is about stopping women from accessing health care, reproductive health care, and birth control. This is about controlling our bodies. This is, if you can't choose when and how you have children, you cannot control your economic future. We have already seen in Oregon refugees from states where they have made abortion illegal, already had people coming from Texas. We are the only state in the union without any restrictions on abortion, I am proud to have voted to increase reimbursement rates, to increase access to birth control, and to make sure that we remain the state without restrictions on a woman's right to choose. I will do that in Congress.
And finally, Sammy, your thoughts again on Roe versus Wade and possibly even taking on the Supreme Court.
I'm a pro-choice candidate, and I support women's right to choose. The decision should be up to the women, and the services and the resources should be provided to her, and Congress should act accordingly. I will vote to codify Roe versus Wade into a legislation in Congress. I will repeal the Hyde Amendment. And I believe we need to invest in reproductive health services. Decisions on reproductive health are all the way from school boards to the Supreme Court. That's why when I was in the school board, I was endorsed by the state Planned Parenthood because I believed in women's right to choose and in educating the children about that, sex education, and providing contraceptives, and standing up for the girls and the women and folks who ministrate in Oregon, across the nation, and as a grandson of my grandma who had 14 pregnancies, six children, I will fight for the right to choose here and abroad, so I will repeal the gag rule as well for international services.
And we're at
Thank you.
time. Thank you, Sammy. Our next question will begin with John, and this question also incorporates some input from our audience today. Some elected officials across the country continue to deny that President Biden was the rightful winner of the 2020 presidential election. How will you work to ensure that elections are run fairly and accurately, and what would you say to Americans who are concerned about an erosion of democratic norms?
Well, the erosion of democratic norms is occurring post-election. The election of Mr. Biden was one of the best and most accurate and truthful elections in history, according to all the people who monitored this election. Thank goodness for those people doing the hard work. We have a robust and excellent election system. We have a lot of misinformation, and we have to remember that misinformation has to be fought tooth and nail. As I said earlier, my family are Holocaust survivors. We have seen the cost of misinformation in my own family. And we have to be on the streets, we have to be in the paper, we have to be on the television telling the truth. And that's, as a scientist, that's all I seek, is the truth. And we have to make that the norm. It has to be part of our culture that truth is what we seek. And so it is a challenging time, but it is not a question of our election quality.
Thank you, John. Andrew, the question now to you on how to ensure elections are run fairly and accurately, and what would you say to Americans concerned about the erosion of democratic norms?
I'd say they have a right and a responsibility to be concerned and to act. It's a very dangerous moment in America when it comes to the degrading of democracy. And we need to rebuild the fabric, and that takes patience, but it also takes urgency, one conversation at a time. My firstborn is named Selma. That is an homage to my hero, John Lewis, a great American who gave his life for American democracy, who called the right to vote nearly sacred, and who talked about the need to make good trouble in defense of democracy. But John also talked about something else, and that was about how he never gave up on anybody. And we have lots of people in this country right now, millions of people, who believe wrongly that the election was rigged against them. And the question you have to ask yourself is, why do they feel that way? Why have we lost so much trust and respect for democratic institutions? And one reason is that people do not believe that politicians in D.C. are working for them. They believe that they're working for corporate backers and corporate interests. We need to change that script, and you need to choose wisely to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And Tommy, the question is now to you.
I've been waiting for this question, to be honest with you. You know, there was 0.0001% voter fraud last election, literally none. You know, and the reason why I was waiting for this question is because I have helped shut down a lot of the Republicans, or people call themselves Christians, on the whole voter fraud thing. And I'm going to give you guys tools right now to help you with your Christian friends who believe that Donald Trump won in 2020. Ready? All right. Is God sovereign? Yes, he is. Well, then if God put Trump in office in 2016, he took Trump out of office in 2020. It's as simple as that. If you have a Christian friend who believes that Donald Trump is supposed to be in office right now, throw that little bit of truth out there, and if they try to argue with you, you just have to give them a look like, seriously, if they believe in God, then they believe in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Doyle, the question to you now about running elections fairly and accurately and possible erosion of democratic norms.
Thank you. With what happened on January 6th, I think we're all concerned about political violence and the erosion of democratic norms. And that means that as Democrats, we must step up and defend democracy. That means fighting to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in the United States Senate and passing the Disclose Act, which would end big spending under the Citizens United rules by dark money billionaire super PACs like we're seeing now in this election for my opponent, Val Hoyle. When billionaires buy our elections, democratic norms are eroded. And as Democrats, we need to stand strong. I support universal voter registration and vote by mail. In Oregon, we have strong voting rights and practices that we can share with the rest of the country. That's what I'll do in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Doyle. And Val, the question is now to you.
So this is the most critical issue that is facing us today. And the misinformation that is out there about whether or not President Biden won the election is purposeful. Undermining the integrity of the ballot is purposeful. I have spoken to county clerks all across this state who are getting threats. And here in Oregon, we have paper ballots. We have a process where Democrats and Republicans watch this. It is irrefutable that Biden won this election, and yet these people don't believe it happened. My opponent in the general election, Alex Skarlatos, will not admit that Joe Biden won the election, and they have a tracker here today, Cade, say hi, Cade, to see if they can catch me out saying something. The fact of the matter is, in this general election, democracy is on the ballot. It is between someone that believes that each person should have a vote and someone that believes that access to the ballot should be for the rich, for the privileged, and for those people that vote for Donald Trump.
Thank you, Val. Sammy, the question now to you about fair and accurate elections.
Number one, we are on the ballot for the primary, just to be clear. And I share your concern for those who are concerned about our democracy. I shared the concern in January 6th. And we co-signed a statement with the chairs of the two Democratic parties in my region, along with 120 people saying what's happening in terms of political violence is not okay. We need to show the children what democracy looks like. It's civil, it's arguments, it's compromise, but never it is about being violent or downing the integrity of our elections. Shortly after I received those threats and my lawn signs were shot after my election, and I shared my concerns about those who have received those threats, such as my colleague mentioned, county clerks and other elected officials locally. And we're standing up. We're not going to slow down. We're going to stand up for integrity in our elections, paper trail in every ballot, so we will have vote by mail, automatic registration. Don't lose faith in our democracy, because I will never lose faith in my democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. And Jake, the question is now to you.
There's an old Native American story where the grandfather said, "Son, there are two wolves in me. One is filled with hate and evil and dread and anger and rage. The other one is filled with love and happiness and joy and mirth." And the grandson asked, "Well, which one wins?" And the grandfather said, "The one you feed." And this exists with all of us. There is hate in all of us, and there's love in all of us. So who fans the flame of hate or love? We now have something where the mainstream media is completely getting us into a place of complete mass psychosis where we just hate each other. We're so angry at each other, and it shouldn't be allowed. Fox News is getting sued by Smartmatic for $2.8 billion in a defamation case because Lou Dobbs reported that their machines didn't work. Now he's off the air. That was the #1 station on Fox News. Now he's off the air because of that. If you pass the fairness doctrine, you'll be allowed to sue these companies for engaging in sensational news. We can't be held victim to this anymore. We simply don't have the years in our lives on this earth to be this angry.
And that closes the Q&A portion of our candidates forum. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions. We have plenty more that we were not able to get to due to time constraints. In the closing minutes of this program, we'll now turn to the candidates who will have 1 minute each to present their closing arguments. And we will begin with Andrew.
Thank you to the City Club. Thank you to KLCC. Thank you to my fellow candidates. It is not easy to run for office, and it is a privilege to be up here with each of you, so thank you. This is a once-in-a-generation election. I know you hear that from politicians a lot, but this one really is. The first time in 36 years when Peter DeFazio is now on the ballot. An opportunity to think about where we want to go in the future. Not about what's happened, but about where we're heading. I am the son of school teachers. I'm a father of 3. I'm a civil rights attorney at the ACLU. And I'm trying to bring a new generation of leadership to DC, a generation that understands that partisanship and polarization has not been able to tackle the challenges we face, from climate to the cost of living crisis. And it's a generation that understands that the only way forward is together. The only way forward is what Jake said about love, creating that beloved community of John Lewis by bringing people together to solve problems. That's the way we rebuild our democracy, and that's the way we deliver results for the people of this district and beyond. I'd be honored by your vote. Thank you.
Shifting now to Tommy, your closing statement, please.
First of all, thank you for having me here today. Like I said, I'm a local kid. I speak from the heart. You know, I think everybody kind of got that from me here. I've never ran for office before, but when I heard Peter was retiring, it took me about 3.5 seconds to realize that I needed to run. And the reason is like some of my other candidates have said, is love and kindness and an overwhelming sense to serve. I know everybody up here has a passion to help people, and I do too. You know, from my time in the Navy to being an entrepreneur to going to University of Oregon and everything else like that, I've always been a proven leader. I've always been able to get people from all over different walks of life to come together for a common goal. And I know if you give me a chance, you'll be proud of me. I plan on only really serving for 2 years. If I do my job really, really well, then you'll vote me again. If I don't, then I did everything I could during that 2 years. Thank you so much. God bless.
Doyle, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. This district has changed in the redistricting, and in a midterm year, that will be tough for our party. Our district has a Democratic majority, and it's a bright spot for Democrats. We deserve a Democrat who is unbought by billionaires and big corporations, who has a consistent record of progressive leadership. Democrats now make up the majority in Oregon's 4th district, followed by unaffiliated voters, who are mostly younger, under the age of 45. I've been campaigning in every county: Lane, Benton, Lincoln, Coos, Curry, Douglas, been on both big campuses, OSU, University of Oregon, and I know that's what it's going to take to beat Alex Garlatos in the general election. That's why I'm the strongest candidate for our party in 2022. To win in a midterm year with a depressed turnout, our nominee needs to drive turnout with genuine momentum and enthusiasm to inspire disillusioned voters. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Val, your closing statement, please.
Okay. We've had a great forum today, and there hasn't been a lot of significant ideological differences. You know, we all want to raise the minimum wage, pass paid sick leave, expand reproductive health, protect vulnerable workers, and aggressively address the climate crisis. The difference is that I've delivered on every single one of these issues in the legislature, and I've built a broad coalition in this campaign. I also have delivered as Oregon's Labor Commissioner. It's why I've earned the support of Peter DeFazio, of Senator Jeff Merkley, of Ron Wyden, of the League of Conservation Voters, of Planned Parenthood Action Fund, of tribal elected and community leaders in every single county in this district. I know I can win in November because I have personally knocked on tens of thousands of doors in every single county, not just this year, but for the past 20 years. I know I can win. I know I can continue to be a strong voice, and I hope I can earn your support. Thank you for being here today.
And we turn now to Sammy for your closing statement.
Thank you, and thanks for the audience, those who are listening and watching and who are here. We deserve an opportunity for a better America centered on civility, problem solving, and community building. My story in public service stems in my belief in your voice, and you, every one of us, my belief in our democracy. And that's why I'm running, to be a voice for all, to believe in service. As an engineer, I focused on listening and problem solving, and I delivered with community, not for community. I ask you for your vote for me, not despite of the diversity I bring, but because of it. I want you to join me and my colleagues and friends and community members who endorse me, electeds and clergy and community leaders, by joining at SAMI, S-A-M-I, for Congress.com, SAMIforcongress.com. Endorse, support, join us in knocking on tens of thousands of doors, and many people motivated, including my friend who just got her citizenship yesterday, and the first thing she did that morning,
we are at time.
volunteering.
I'm sorry to interrupt
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, and a closing statement from you, Jake.
Thank you. I was talking to Jennifer before we started this. Let's understand what the homework assignment is here. It is very easy to feel good right now because we're amongst friends, but we need someone who can beat Alex Carlatos. And this district will go red if you choose the wrong person. Right now, the Cook Partisan Index is now +3 towards the Republicans. That's just the way the pendulum swings. So you need somebody who can sort of access at least 5 to 10% of their votes here. Now, the city that I'm proposing would bring in loggers, it would bring in farmers towards a better economy that can get a per capita of 100,000 by 2030. That's a promise. We can do it. We can be a beacon for the whole nation, for the whole world, on what a district looks like when a congressman actually cares about its constituency. So let me be that person for you. And that person certainly, we all know that here, is not Val.
And finally, we turn to John for his closing statement for the candidacy for Congressional District 4.
Thank you so much. What a treat to be with everybody here. My mother started Planned Parenthood in my hometown. Her amazing activism inspired me to make this world better. Out of college, I worked in Silicon Valley, but these problems were going to be solved with or without me, quite frankly. So I flew myself to Africa. And working with UNICEF and others, I saw that water was the key to life. That was 1985. I dedicated my life to water. And now I work in 22 countries and across Oregon, and I am the president of my scientific society. My Oregon company was the first to use fiber optics to solve major water problems, for salmon recovery and identifying sources of pollution. I will be the only earth scientist in the House or Senate. I will put the earth first. I will bring 40 years as an educator to put students first, free preschool through community college. I was the lead caregiver for my wife following her accident. I learned what we need to do in healthcare. We need to put patients first. Put the first earth scientist and problem-solving engineer into Congress.
All right, thank you all very much. And I now turn the program back to City Club President Kitty Piercy for these remarks.
Thank you. This good? Yep. Okay.
First of all, before I make my usual comments, I just want to say what a pleasure it was to listen to all of you. And I want to... There are no fuzzy brains in this group. And we're very honored to know that we have all of you as citizens in our state and are contributing as much as you can to make this a better world to live in. So thank you very much. This has been our April 15, 2022 program. Who will represent the Democrats in the CD4 race? Before we thank our speakers today, I guess I did some, I'll do some more later. I'd like to recognize our diamond sponsors. Kaiser Permanente exists to provide high-quality, affordable health care services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. More information is available at www.kp.org. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, Act creatively and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health has been proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond as your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years. Peace Health's mission is to keep you and your family healthy. Learn more at peacehealth.org. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality education opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. We are also grateful for generous support from the City of Eugene and from Lane County. I'd like to acknowledge now our Ruby sponsor, Johnson Johnson Lucas in Middleton. Support for the City Club comes from Johnson Johnson Lucas in Middleton, a team of experienced, compassionate attorneys fighting for justice. If you have been seriously harmed by wrongdoing and need help, contact us at justicelawyers.com. Today's gold sponsors are Arcimoto and Hummingbird Wholesale. Thank you to our in-kind sponsors, KRBM 91.9 Radio, Pack Info, and Simplified Computing LLC, and Dotson's Photography. And a special thank you to public radio station KLCC FM 89.7 for airing City Club's programs on Mondays at 7. Our programs are always available on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and our podcast. We invite everyone, members and non-members, to participate in our programs in person at our new venue, this place right here, the First United Methodist Church at 1376 Olive, or by live stream on your YouTube page. More information is on our website, cityclubofeugene.org. Next week, we will be taking a break for the live program, but we will return on April the 29th with the East and Western Lane County Commission races, as well as forums on the local legislative races. More details and information about future programs can be found online at City Club's website, cityclubofeugene.org. I'd like to thank today's candidates, Sammy Alab-Durba, Doyle Channing, Val Hoyle. She works hard, what can I say? Andrew Kellogg, Jake Matthews, John Selker, and Tommy Smith. Thank you all very much. One more round of applause for everyone. It's a great program, and this concludes today's program. Be well, be safe, and go out in the sunshine.